Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. The other way. Let's watch.
And has really big hands. He can cut up some meat. Sure, why not? And I am willing to help him in any way that I can, as long as I don't have to deal with any of the meat. Wow. Ooh.
Llegamos, mi amor, este es mi negocio, nuestro negocio.
Okay, so the way they're editing this, and I think where this is headed with Danielle's face here, that this is supposed to be some sort of disgusting display at a butcher. So he opened a butcher shop recently as a way to make money, and he's introducing her to the butcher shop, and it looks like someone is there with like a fly detractor, like a little fan thing and saying, "Get off, flies." And yeah, from an American standard, or I shouldn't even say American actually, of a certain, I guess, mainstream American standard, this kind of display in a butcher shop would be considered unsanitary and disgusting. And I'm guessing she has that reactivity to it. But as an Asian American who goes to Asian stores and markets, outdoor markets sometimes, I'll tell you that among Asian Americans, as particularly immigrant Asian Americans, the practice of just having meat out in the open is a much more acceptable practice, right? So is it a better idea to have a more sanitary situation where you have refrigeration and sanitation and flies aren't allowed to land on them and all that kind of thing, and people can't sneeze on the food? Yeah, absolutely. But around the world, economics are such that you can't afford that. You literally cannot afford to, one, buy those devices, two, to maintain them, because they can be, I don't know how much those things are, but I'm just going to take a guess and say that those things are thousands of dollars. And three, you don't have the money to even power them. In some places, you can't even afford electricity to keep those things on. So you just do what you do, and you just hope that people cook their meat enough so that they don't get sick, that kind of thing. And from my understanding is a lot of communities around the world, they manage. Are there occasional moments of food poisoning because of this? Yeah, I don't know the statistics, but I'm going to take a guess and say that that is more likely under situations like this. But, you know, it's a matter of pros and cons, and it's a matter of viability. It's a matter of what is even economically possible. I've traveled a little bit in the Caribbean area, and of course there are various different countries with various different economies and situations, but in my experience, there were shops like this. And a lot of times the community, including myself, when I would see a shop like this, I would be rejoicing, because the fact that they even had inventory was a bit of a shock to find. I mean, that was what was so revealing to me traveling in Havana, Cuba, was, and I know that's different from Dominican Republic, of course, but, you know, by contrast, it's probably similar. I don't know much about, I haven't been to Dominican Republic, but I'm guessing it's at least in that direction. And the stores, of which were very few of them, their stock and their inventory were very transient. You would just walk into a store and you would just see what they had that day. And there would be long lines, you know, snaking around the block just to get a bottle of water or just basic necessities like diapers and this kind of thing. And of course, I believe with Cuba, there's an embargo with the United States such that trade can only exist with Cuba and certain nations that are more communist leaning. And so that limits the availability of stock. And I just find I felt so bad for the Cuban people. I mean, the Cuban economy could be completely turned around if we had a different policy with Cuba. And I know that's a political landmine, but walking around in Havana, I just felt bad for people. The amount of, at the very, just even tourism that would boost their economy to some extent and give people just basic incomes would skyrocket. But and of course, there's more tourism from the United States to Cuba. If you kind of know what to say at customs, that kind of thing, it's changing. But my point is that in those stores, it was rare to see meat to begin with. And if you did see it, it might be displayed like this. And it would move so fast because, people were like, oh my God, we finally have this luxury. Let's run down to the store and get it. So yeah, is it strange to my eyes? Yeah, I guess so. But I don't know. Maybe they totally make this work. Now, I don't know. Maybe in Dominican Republic, even this is very strange. Maybe there's a lot more refrigeration than I'm aware of. Who knows? But let's see how this works out.
Mi amor. Todo el carne afuera.
Sí,
¿Por qué
para
no?
que la gente vea la carne.
Pero necesita frío.
So it's fine if she has questions. She might say, but you would think in her head, because I would have similar questions. I'd be like, I would like to think that I would be knowledgeable enough or aware enough to say like, well, maybe my assumptions about how this is supposed to work or how typical butcher shops work is culturally informed. Maybe I should take a break here and just ask questions from curiosity rather than making assumptions and judging everyone. It'd be like if Big Ed, when he arrived in the Philippines and he walks into Rose's home, if he's just like, how come you guys don't have a roof? What's wrong with you people? Obvious. So I think we're heading into that zone where I don't know. Let's see how this plays out.
Tiene frío. Está refrigerada.
No hay frío. Hay moscas. I'm like really torn because I don't want to be like, what the is this? But I also am like, what the is this?
Okay, so you're torn. You recognize that you don't want to hurt his feelings, I'm guessing is what she's saying. But she also was like, oh my God, what's going on? Okay, how about as an American visiting another country in another situation, you take a break, you put the brakes on and you're just like, okay, let's put aside my assumptions. Maybe my assumptions are right, maybe they're wrong. I don't know, I'm in a different culture. How about I ask some questions? How about I get curious about the situation instead of just bulldozing and infantilizing him? I hope she doesn't do that. Let's watch.
That can't be good. There's bugs. How do you eat food with bugs on it?
Yeah, so this is a classic example of what she does and what people like this will do. And she's showing a pattern now of what I'm going to call splaining or micromanaging. It's a style of superior talk and infantilizing and treating other people like they don't know what they're doing. He's a grown man. He knows what flies are and he knows what flies do. But the way that she talks, it's like she's trying to explain flies to an alien from outer space or something, or to a 3-year-old. And when you talk to someone like that, it's hurtful. When someone says something to you that is obvious, the implication is they believe you're so stupid and so incompetent that they have to explain the simplest of concepts, which is her style of communicating.
That can't be good. There's bugs. How do you eat food with bugs on it?
Bugs happen, and I'm going to take a guess and say that even in the United States, the meat industry, if you really knew what happened from slaughter to retail, is disgusting, and flies are probably involved at some point. I don't know. But I'm just going to take a guess and say by the time it's packaged in your supermarket in the nice little, plastic container, that in between what you saw and slaughter, there's a lot of things that you would go, oh my God, and as long as you follow all the rules of cooking and sanitation, it somehow works out in the end. Do some people get poisoned sometimes and have some infection? Yeah, sure. And I'm guessing the rates are maybe a little higher in a situation like this, but it's not like it's rolling around in some cesspool of nastiness. It's on a table. They probably cleaned it and they're making sure that it's staying clean, and presumably they sell it pretty quickly, or they refrigerate it after they're open. You know, maybe they're only open for a little bit of time. I don't know. Let me actually look up to see if this is a common way that they display meat in Dominican Republic. Okay, according to a brief internet search, it sounds like a lot of people from DR claim that this is standard. This butcher shop is standard for Dominican Republic, and that nothing about the business is unsanitary or unusual. It looks unsanitary or looks strange to Danielle, looks strange to my eyes too, but I recognize there are other cultures. Even in my town, like I was saying earlier, there is an open market, an Asian open market in Seattle and Little Saigon, in which when I walk in, my wife doesn't follow me. She has a lower tolerance for that sort of thing. And, you know, I'm half Japanese, I'm half Asian, so I guess I halfway tolerate it. And it's very different. The meat, the fish, some of the things are alive. You know, some of the seafood is still living, and you buy it living, and you take it home and kill it. And you know, there's different cultures around the world. So it sounds like what he is doing right here is the standard. So why is that not entering her mind? Why is that not a possibility? That so there's so many different ways she could be saying this. She could be saying, "Okay, honey, I worry about you. I want you to succeed in business. I want things to work out for you, obviously. I want you to be happy. I also both want us to be financially viable here. And to my eyes, this looks like a disaster. But I don't know, because I'm just a colonializing white American from New York City coming to Dominican Republic. So I could just be completely wrong. But is this the norm in Dominican Republic? Is this what everyone does? And what's the full, because she hasn't even asked any questions, like maybe they immediately refrigerate this. Maybe it's only out for half an hour or so. I don't know. But she might have, or maybe there's a way to make sure you cook it so that nothing bad happens to people or something. I don't know. So there's so many. She could just say, look, I don't want to assume that my culture is the only way to do things. And so is this normal for DR? And then he'd probably say, yeah, this is normal for DR. And she'd be like, oh, okay. Well, And so no one gets sick, because that's the concern, and people are okay buying this. And he'd be like, yeah, everything's fine. And she would say, oh, okay, well, I'll tell you, looks really weird to my eyes, but what do I know? I'm just a stupid American. That would be one approach, but instead.
No entiendo, ¿qué tú dices?
Okay. You need meat to be cold. I don't know how to say that in Spanish.
No.
Yeah, she's real fixated. I don't understand. How does she not put the brakes on at some point? She just is dug in on this, infantilizing and judging him.
It needs to be cold.
La carne se sirve afuera para que la gente la vea.
If
Para que la
I see
gente
meat
la vea.
that it has bugs on it, I'm not going to buy it.
Does it enter your brain that maybe you're in a different country, in a different culture? Has that possibly entered your head at this point? If this was the first white American to colonialize even the Caribbean, let alone the entire world, then I'd just be like, what's it? But this represents just centuries of white people entering into an area and just saying like, well, we're not going to, oh, you have this religion? Well, now you're Catholic. And if you're not Catholic, we're going to kill all of you. Literally, that happened for centuries. This mentality is what we're talking about. And there's a possibility that she was passed down that attitude of superiority and colonialism throughout the millennia of generations of white people. I don't even, I keep saying she's white. I don't know how she identifies, but she presents as white at any rate, so I can't know. But she has all that information. I don't know. I can't tell, but
No entiendo. Dime.
Bugs.
Mosca.
Sí.
Toda la carnicería hay mosca por la carne.
En mi país no hay.
Estoy hablando aquí,
Sin
no tu
aire.
país.
No.
Oye, aquí, no estamos en tu país.
yeah, good. So he's reaching his limit and finally saying, we're not in your country. And that should be a cue. Maybe she'll take that as, okay, all right, we're not in the States. Maybe I should realize that there are other ways of doing things around the world.
Aquí la carne se vende así. Su expresión como de asco. No esperaba eso. Pensé que ella me iba a apoyar, que me decía, mi amor, estoy orgulloso, me siento bien por tu logro.
Yeah, he's a sweet guy. I don't know, maybe he'll be a disaster later in the season, but he's a nice person. And in the interview, he's like, I was hoping that she would be proud of me. But no, that's not what's happening. And he'd give her, I don't know. So in the interviews, often there's more differentiation, more maturity, more baseline I statements, right? She hurt my feelings because I was hoping that she would be proud of me. And when she wasn't proud of me, it hurt my feelings. It felt like she was judging me. Okay. When they're actually in the situation where they're interacting between the two of them, they rarely exhibit that differentiation and that healthy communication. So I really hope that he's able to say that to her, just be like, hey, honey, I was hoping you'd be proud of me, and it hurts my feelings. I don't know if she would rise to the occasion, but it would maybe give her a chance to get out of this rut of, I'm going to micromanage your life, I'm going to colonialize, I'm going to explain to you this entire time. You know, maybe it'd get her out of that rut.
No, fue todo lo contrario.
Es porque yo estoy enferma cuando come carne aquí. Porque tiene bacteria.
And I guess this also is triggering me because I grew up as a Japanese American eating both American food like hot dogs and pizza. I mean, I know pizza's Italian, but you know, American pizza. Things that white Americans ate, I would eat hamburgers, french fries, and loved it. And I also ate Japanese American food and Japanese food. Sushi, sukiyaki, tempura, gyoza. Kimchi, I know kimchi is Korean, but we would eat a lot of kimchi. I would have kimchi sandwiches when I was a kid. Still love kimchi sandwiches. I can't really have a lot of kimchi in the house right now because my wife is put off by the smell, which I get, but to me it's soul food, and so, but you know, I can live without it all the time. Anyway, the point is that I grew up eating food that in my community of dominated by white people, it was considered disgusting, and I had to hide it. I couldn't show people what I was really eating. You know, at Thanksgiving, we would have both the turkey and the stuffing and the mashed potatoes, and we'd have sushi and, you know, I don't know, just other kinds of Japanese little doodads, Asian little appetizers, rice and little pickled plums and other kinds of interesting things that are great. And I love those things. Rice crackers, this kind of stuff. Point is that I was ashamed, particularly in the 70s. It became less so as time went on, as the Seattle area became a little bit more cosmopolitan. And I guess I have to admit that as white people started to have sushi and love it, because at some point, like in the 90s, I remember in the 80s from Los Angeles, it was considered to be kind of upscale to have sushi. And then that influenced, that's my memory of the shift. And then in the 90s, that notion started to spread throughout the United States that white people, fancy white people, would have sushi. It was considered to be cosmopolitan, or it meant that you had a good palate or something, I don't know, had good taste. And then suddenly all these fancy Japanese restaurants started to, you know, pop up, often not owned by Japanese people, but it's fine. And I have to admit that I was a little resentful because as a kid, I would get really made fun of because I would eat raw fish. I would eat that Japanese food. It was just universally considered to be disgusting. And so when I see white people just stomping their way through life and just saying like, your food is gross, there's some trauma there for me, obviously. And I think I'm getting triggered.
No tiene bacteria la carne.
Porque cuando no está fría, tiene bacteria.
La carne está fría. Toca.
Okay, so he says it's cold. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but I'm guessing that means that they only display it for a certain amount of time and they keep it in the freezer overnight, or they put it on ice overnight or something. So he's trying to explain to her, it's like, it's it's refrigerated. Plus, if you buy it fast enough and you cook it well enough, I think it reduces, don't quote me on that, but I think it reduces the risk significantly, right? All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself, really, because you deserve it. You really, really do.